Football Convos number 9, James Merilatt.
When you're sitting around, in the spare bedroom drawing up business plans and brainstorming things, it's just kind of what you hope you're going to be able to put together.
For conversations with the players, coaches, and contributors that make this game great.
Regulators, mount up. We're coming.
Football Convos. Here's your host, Andy Carlson.
Very pleased to be joined now on Football Convos by James Merilatt. He's on the Twitter machine at James Merilatt. How are you today, sir?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. James is the president of Mile High Sports and founder of Cover 32, a network that covers every single NFL team with a legion of up-and-coming bloggers. And, James, I just wanted to have you on today to talk about Mile High Sports, Cover 32, and, of course, our wonderful game of football. But first, as with every guest on Football Convos, I wanted to get your football story. So where did it all start with you?
You know what? I'm one of those people who literally has been a football fan since birth. I have a picture of me sitting in the little incubator thing or whatever it is in the nursery at the hospital when I was born, with a orange and blue stocking cap that my grandma had knitted for me. So I was a Bronco fan from day one. Went to the games with my mom and dad, and both sets of grandparents since I can remember, and have always kind of been that football nerd. I was the kid who could sit in the stands during preseason games when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, and the adults sitting around us would ask, "Hey, who's number 52?" They wouldn't know who some of the rookies were, and I was the kid who knew that stuff and studied lineups and depth charts and things like that at way too young of an age. So I started early. I've been a fan of the game since I can remember, and it's just something that hasn't wavered over the years.
Now, not to date you at all, but were you around in the early Elway days, the drive and then the 3 Super Bowl losses before getting into the Terrell Davis sweet spot years?
I certainly was. My oldest childhood memory, or as far back as I can go, I was 4 years old. I can remember Super Bowl 12 faintly. Mainly just remember being, at Grandma and Grandpa's house. My mom and Dad actually flew down to New Orleans, went to the game, so my brother and I were stuck at Grandma and Grandpa's house watching it. So I don't remember a ton of that, but I remember having a bunch of balloons we were going to pop when things went well, and didn't get much of a chance to do that, unfortunately, that day. And then the 3 Super Bowl losses with Elway in the 80s, I was in my teens, so I definitely remember those well, and they were crushing defeats. And then obviously the 2 Super Bowl victories were in my 20s, so those are great moments, and got to share them with a lot of those same people, Dad and Grandpas that I went to games with for years and years and years. So it was it's a big family thing for us, and we were there for the good and the bad.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we start digging into your stuff, as a Bronco fan, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about John Elway. Now, you live out in Colorado, correct?
Correct. Yep, we're based out of Denver.
Okay. Now, is John this no faults, can't do wrong, minor deity out there, as I would kind of expect he would be?
Yeah, no doubt. We in addition to Cover 32, you mentioned Mile High Sports, and we do a magazine and a radio station out here. And I somewhat kiddingly and somewhat truthfully refer to him as Teflon John when I'm on the air, because he doesn't get any criticism. I mean, there's people around town with the "In John We Trust" T-shirts, and pretty much everything he does is just accepted on face value. Hey, this is going to work out. This is going to be fine. Which, for the most part, is a pretty good way to go about it. I mean, as a player, he was obviously a great player, Hall of Famer. Mm-hmm. Led us to 5 Super Bowls and 2 championships and a lot of great memories. And as an executive, I mean, he took over a team that was 4-12, and they've been AFC West champs every year since, 4 years in a row. So he's certainly made a lot of good moves, and he's just one of those people. And we all know him. We all come across people in life that just everything they touch seems to turn to gold, and it really just is. There are certain people that kind of have that winner characteristic that they're gonna will themselves to victory or success, and John definitely has that. So the trust in him isn't misplaced. It does get a little crazy though that that, you really can't say anything negative about him without people coming down on you. And, he certainly had his faults. His drafts have not been particularly good. Fortunately, he's been able to fill in those gaps with great free agent acquisitions. I mean, he wins the offseason almost every year when it comes to free agency. But, he pretty much can do no wrong here in Denver. He's the living legend here in the Mile High City, that's for sure.
Yeah, it does seem like they've been loading up, especially last offseason with T.J. Ward, Aqib Talib, DeMarcus Ware, and this year, towards the end, Peyton, that's going to be the big question. Do you think he's going to be coming back?
Yeah, I think he's going to be back. I think that, towards the end of the year, it was interesting because on Christmas Eve, after practice, he was asked if he'd be back, and he said, yeah, I'm going to play next year if the Broncos will have me. And, and everybody chuckled and laughed, and it was, that self-deprecating humor kind of thing that people eat up with Peyton. And then 18 days later, when they get bumped out of the playoffs by the Colts, he was certainly non-committal. And I think that had to do with a couple of things. One, just the disappointment of the loss. I think it hit him hard. But it was also, now in hindsight, the Broncos were just in disarray in terms of their coaching staff. They had two coordinators that were interviewing for jobs and had a foot out the door. And come to find out, they had a head coach who 2 days before the game against the Colts had already basically lined up his next deal. So I think he was a little bit dismayed by the fact that, the clock's ticking on him. He's out there playing hurt. He's, doing a lot of things trying to get a championship, and the people around him didn't have the same goals and were more worried about where they were going to land next year. So, I think he was waiting to see what John Elway did in terms of the coaching staff. It took less than 24 hours for John Fox to get booted out of Denver, and I think a lot of that was Elway not liking what went down with the coaching staff, and certainly Peyton Manning not liking what went down with the coaching staff.
Yeah, and Kubiak, probably to a lesser degree, is Denver royalty as, Elway's backup for a number of years, offense coordinator on the Shanahan Super Bowl teams. Then he's coming back in. Do you see him as an upgrade over John Fox, or do you just more see him as an extension of Elway, kind of a rubber stamp, as it were?
I certainly see him as an upgrade over John Fox. We have, whether it's on Cover 32 or Mile High Sports, we have not been huge John Fox fans since day one. He's got a little Forrest Gump in him in terms of being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, that's fair.
He was 1-4 to start with his first year, basically refusing to put in Tim Tebow, which everybody was calling for, and he finally gave in, and that turned into that miracle season of 2011 that got Fox his first AFC title, AFC West title. And then he had 3 years of Peyton Manning, which, to some extent you can make the argument that John Fox wasted 3 years of Peyton Manning. I mean, they won 3 AFC West titles, went to one Super Bowl, but they blew the playoff game against Baltimore. They were thoroughly unprepared for the Super Bowl last year, as everybody who watched could tell, and a lot of that had to do with lack of imagination on John Fox's part. Just couldn't imagine that there'd be crowd noise at a neutral site. He let his team run wild in New York City, which anybody who was there covering the game certainly was aware of that fact. And then this year he blew the playoff game against Indianapolis with he was worried about landing in Chicago more than seemingly about beating the Colts. So I think it's a major upgrade. I think Gary Kubiak's a very good football coach. His record in Houston wasn't great, but you got to consider what he took over of basically an expansion team. He wasn't their first coach, but he followed Tom Capers, and they hadn't done anything, turned them into a playoff team. And obviously, the last year when he got fired toward the end of the season was a debacle. But it was the Case Keenum at quarterback, and it was his health issues. And if you look at the 2 years before that, he won the AFC South title both years. So he certainly did some things that were impressive. Won playoff games with T.J. Yates and Matt Schaub, which is, I think, saying something about your coaching ability. So I do think he's going to be an upgrade. And I think that, John Fox is just one of those people that, he's a player's coach. He's a little too easygoing. The inmates kind of got to the point where they were running the asylum. And Gary Kubiak's just not going to be that way. He runs a tight ship, and you have to do things the right way. And he learned that under Mike Shanahan. Certainly, Mike Shanahan was a guy who, when he took over for Wade Phillips, Shannon Sharp was a Pro Bowl player. He was a great tight end. He was a guy who basically didn't practice during the week because he had a quote-unquote bad ankle. And Mike Shanahan told him, look, if you don't practice, you're not going to play. And he nipped that kind of thing in the bud, and he was willing to do that with a future Hall of Fame tight end. That's the kind of stuff, Wade Phillips' regime here in Denver was similar to the John Fox regime. I think Gary Kubiak's going to tighten things up, and that's what John Elway was looking for, somebody who's going to, not going to be a taskmaster, but just, detail-oriented, and that certainly wasn't John Fox.
And plus, if Peyton does retire, you can always sign Matt Schaub.
He will probably be available. And there is some thought, and, obviously Brock Osweiler has not gotten much of a chance to play. I mean, Peyton Manning, other than the year he missed the entire season, he never has missed a game. So, when he's playing, he plays, and he plays basically every snap. So we haven't seen a lot of Brock Osweiler, but there are some people here who, are interested to see what he'll do in Kubiak's system, and he's got a lot of physical characteristics anyway that are somewhat Joe Flacco-esque, kind of a big, tall guy with a big arm. So, at some point we're probably going to get to see that, but I think this year we'll get to see at least one more go around with Peyton Manning.
All right, so getting into you, James, Cover 32 and Mile High Sports, which project started first?
Mile High Sports. We launched the monthly magazine back in 2002, so we'll have our 13th anniversary in August. We started with the magazine, added the radio station in 2007, and then revamped our website in 2012 to be more of a news site. When we did that, we noticed, and this wasn't a surprise to us or shouldn't be a surprise to anybody else, but we noticed that the vast majority of our traffic was coming from the Broncos portion of the site. Mm-hmm. So as we were looking to expand our business, initially we were going to do a milehighsports.com type of a site in multiple markets and build a network. And then we decided, hey, if football is the vast majority of what we're doing here in Denver, it's going to be that way in most markets, save for maybe St. Louis or a random place where baseball is king. Mm-hmm. And that spawned the idea of Cover 32, which we launched last August. It's something that we looked at and said, hey, football is king. It's the biggest sport in every market. Let's get in there and cover every team on a network-wide basis.
That seems like quite an undertaking. How did you drum up all the talent to start covering all these 32 teams?
It's one of those things that you just kind of got to start looking in all places. And, some of it's, posting things on social media. Some of it is friends of a friend of a friend. Some of it was Craigslist saying, hey, we're looking for writers. And, you just have to start sifting through all the people that are interested in doing it. But, it's one of the cool things about the internet and about being in the media today is there's a lot of talent out there. There really is. Mm-hmm. And there's more opportunity for that talent to find an audience. And, back when I was coming up, if you wanted to get into the media, especially the sports media, you kind of had to pay your dues. And I always used to joke that, that would mean moving to Walla Walla, Washington and covering, high school volleyball. And there's nothing wrong with Walla Walla, Washington or high school volleyball, but, that's a path that not a lot of people can follow, whether you have family obligations or, financial obligations or whatever. Given the way the internet is now and the way media has expanded, if people are talented, they can jump right into covering something like the NFL, covering teams in major markets. Some of the old school media folks would say, well, you're not paying your dues and you're not having to jump through the hoops that we all had to. And I get it, but it's also a way to expose talent. We're not limiting our talent pool by, hey, you gotta find people who are willing and able to jump through all these hoops. It's just a matter of let's create some opportunity. And it has not been difficult to find people who want to write, who have opinions, who really are passionate about their teams. And that's the other part of it is that's a piece of the media that's changing a little bit too. Of, it used to be, well, you can't be a fan, which I always found kind of funny. That's why we all got into talking about sports as opposed to covering the city beat or something else. And I think Bill Simmons was kind of the guy who first started changing that. Of arguably the most popular journalist in the past decade, and he's an unabashed fan of all things in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
So you can be a fan of your team, you can still be objective, and I think readers and I think other fans want to hear from people who have the same passion for the team that they do.
Yeah, I agree, and I've really come to find that I live up here in Minnesota, and some of the old school Twin Cities beat writers, like the Sid Hartmans, Patrick Royces, Suhans, I really enjoy their stuff still, but it seems like there is a bit of a stagnation with it, and I have found myself reading a lot more of these, quote-unquote fan blogger sites, Vikings Territory, Daily Norseman, Cover 32 Vikings, hello, and there are a lot of talented writers out there, and you do have to go through more of a volume as opposed to the old school brick and mortar writers, but it is so worth it finding fresh perspectives, people out there rather than the old paid their dues coming up sort of hard-boiled writers out there, not to throw too much shade on their work, but it is kind of an interesting inflection point, and I really wonder how sports journalism and journalism in general is going to look in about 20, 25 years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I certainly think it's evolving, and I grew up here in Denver and reading Woody Page and Mark Kislin and some of those guys, and it's been fun getting to know them and working alongside of them, and they're very, very talented writers, and I'm with you. I still enjoy their work, but the old school way of it of kind of thinning out people and paying your dues, made it to where it was easier to find the content because it was only one or two sources. Now you're right, there's sheer volume. The trade-off though of having to go through the volume, I think, is worth it because you can find so many different perspectives and so much talent that I really do think it's worthwhile. I think that over the course of time, it's going to kind of come back into the middle somewhere, where instead of having one or two options in a market or about a topic, or having hundreds of options like there probably are now, and that may be a little bit of an overstatement. It's going to
not too much of a stretch.
It's going to meet somewhere in the middle. There's the economics of it as well, that you can't financially support that many different outlets indefinitely, but I think there's going to be a happy medium of, as a Vikings fan, as an example, you'll have 15, 20 different places you can go get content, and instead of 2 or instead of 100, and I think that'll be good for everybody. And the other cool thing about the internet is, there's an ease of entry that allows people with good ideas to launch things, try things, and try and come up with new ways to go about it. I mean, 25 years ago, it's fairly expensive to launch a new newspaper in town. It's pretty easy to come up with a website concept and try and get that off the ground. Now, after you do that, though, it's all about the content. We think we have a good concept. We think that there's a need for the content that we're putting together, but we got to execute it, and that's been the part that's been fun to do over the last 2.5 years. Is continually evolve our editorial game plan and our writers, and continue to put out better and better content with each passing month. So what the sports landscape is going to look like is going to be interesting. So it's going to change on every front. The written word, cable TV is probably going to be something that is going to be vastly different as Netflix and Hulu and things like that take over, and obviously sports talk radio is going to be something that moves more and more into your handheld or your mobile or any of those kind of devices. So it will be interesting, that's for sure.
And you're talking about ease of barrier entry, and not to toot my own horn too much, but started a Vikings podcast about a little over a year ago, and it's been picking up steam, getting some decent traffic, and I've been putting that mother out for like $20 a month. Whereas 10 years ago, if you wanted to get your voice heard, you would have to pay your dues, like you said, intern at a sports radio talk, maybe take some weekend and some late night shifts, and that's the path you had to go to. But now, any jackass with a microphone and opinion, as shown by yours truly, can get their message out there, get their voice be heard.
Yeah, no, I'm entirely with you, and that's, it's a lot of how we do our radio station too. I mean, we have the most live and local sports talk here in Denver. It's a good mix of longtime broadcasters and new up and coming talent, and we pride ourselves on trying to find people that back in the day maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but back in the day would have never had the opportunity at their age and their experience level to be on the airwaves in a top 20 market. But in terms of their ability and their opinions and their entertainment values, certainly are worthy of being on there. So, I'm in addition to the online space with Cover 32, I'm in the print business, I'm in the radio business, and those are two industries that people continually say, those are dying. Mm-hmm. They're not dying, they're just changing. And, I think the people who can see how they're evolving and see how they're changing and can adapt with those changes are going to be able to succeed. And knock on wood, we've been able to do that so far. But mm-hmm. It's going to continue to be that way for the next decade or so. It's going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, it's funny how you mentioned that. Excuse me. Sports radio might be dying. It's not really dying. It's just shifting mediums where the terrestrial AM/FM is starting to go towards satellite radio, podcasts, on demand, where people can get very specific, niched what they want to hear at their fingertips, as opposed to just turning the radio and hoping that the topic that they want to talk or listen about is on.
Yeah, and radio in general is changing, and the day and age of huge overhead and big staffs and all that kind of stuff are gone. You just have to run a leaner business, but radio works when it's done, one of two ways. Either, from a music standpoint, you keep it lean by, you bringing in content that's coming in over a satellite, basically, and not having a lot of live on-air personalities. And then, or being local. And in talk, local is best for sports. That's what people are passionate about and care about. So, I think that'll continue to be on terrestrial, as well as moving to the internet, whether it's streaming or it becomes even smaller segmentation with podcasts and things like that. I think there's room for all of it, but for us, it certainly is. Hey, we're going to be live and local. You can get ESPN radio on the internet, on satellite, on terrestrial. You can get it so many places. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but the Monday after a Bronco game, people in Denver want to talk about what happened in the game. They don't want to listen to Mike and Mike talk about the Jets. Nothing against Mike and Mike. They do a great show, but that's just the reality of it. So, radio is evolved to where you got to do it in a leaner fashion in terms of cost, and then you have to keep it local. At least that's been our experience.
Now, to put a subtle dig towards you and the Broncos, when Tebow Mania was going down, I'm sure Bronco fans only wanted to talk about Tebow, but the rest of the nation, we were kind of over it.
No, I'm with you. It was interesting. I was traveling at the time, and it was right before Christmas 2011, and everywhere I went, I told people, I'm from Denver. All they wanted to do was talk about Tebow, and then you'd turn on ESPN, and the tracker down the right-hand side of the screen was Tebow this, Tebow that, and it's like, man, now that I'm not in Denver, for a few days, and it's not front and center, I'm even getting tired of it. But I think rational Bronco fans look at it and say, hey, that was a really fun run that had no ability to sustain itself long term. And the Broncos obviously made the right move moving from Tebow to Manning, but it was a lot of fun for 5 or 6 weeks. It really was. I mean, it was one of those things that, sports nowadays are such big business. They're so corporate that a lot of times that sort of just purity and that passion of it that you and I, loved when we were kids and kind of got us into it, those things are hard to find anymore. There's too many. The great moment gets squelched by all the photographers around, and we got to get people off the field to the Bon Jovi concert or whatever else they've got going on with. Yeah, and there's just not as many moments that are just pure joy and pure exhilaration, and those Tebow games for Bronco fans certainly were. I was at the playoff game against the Steelers. He threw the 80-yard touchdown to Demaryius Thomas in overtime, and it was just sheer pandemonium. I mean, it was the equivalent of what you saw in Seattle this past weekend, which that kind of a comeback and just that kind of a moment where you're going from you think your season's over to you're going to the Super Bowl in a matter of moments. You can't script that kind of stuff, and unfortunately, those things are few and far between. But if you get a chance to be a part of one, you're going to be hooked forever.
Plus, the Tebow run gave me one of my favorite moments in sports. That primetime game against the Jets where Tebow ran for basically the game-winning touchdown where Eric Smith didn't keep contained. And then they panned up to Elway up in the booth where he's just like giving the golf clap disgusted, like, oh, all right.
Yeah, he was happy about it, but he also kind of knew, all right, we're creating a monster here. It was an interesting year to be a fan or be a journalist covering the team as well, because you'd watch 55 minutes of just brutal football. I mean, it was bad football. Put you to sleep kind of games. And then it would be 5 minutes of where in the heck did this come from? So it was a roller coaster to be sure.
All right. Now, just want to hit you up with two quick questions before we get you with the 3 and out. Now, what was the biggest hurdle starting off with? How about the first project, Mile High Sports?
With Mile High Sports, the biggest project was just, or biggest hurdle was just, getting access. We were a couple of kids in our late 20s who didn't have any experience in terms of working for other local outlets. So getting the credibility to get access with the Broncos, Nuggets, Abs, all the teams in town, that was certainly a hurdle. And all the media people were great. They just wanted to see, hey, are you guys going to be able to sustain this and do this more than, an issue or two? And once we proved, hey, we're in this, for the long haul, we're going to keep cranking this out month after month. They were certainly very accommodating. So that was by far the biggest hurdle, other than, from a business standpoint, the biggest hurdle is how do you make things profitable? And that's always the challenge, whether you're in year 1 or year 13, is, how do you pay the bills? But in terms of the product, it was just getting access to the team and getting credibility.
Now, what was the moment where you were like, I got this, or we got this? This is awesome.
You know what? We have a big issue every year. It comes out in December. It's our swimsuit issue. We call it Snow Angel, and it was year 5 or 6. And we have an annual release party for it. And my business partner and I were standing there looking around, and there were 500, 600, 700 people there, and there's our big blow-up covers all over the place, and there's the models walking around, and there's some of the who's who in Denver in terms of athletes and business people, and you just look around and go, man, this is pretty cool. This is when you're sitting around in the spare bedroom drawing up business plans and brainstorming things. This is kind of what you hope you're going to be able to put together. So that was probably the moment where we looked at it and said, okay, now we got something here. It didn't mean that the work was done, but it meant, all right, we're on to something. Let's see where we can take it. So it took 4 or 5 years to get to that point, though.
And I just Googled some of your Snow Angels, and I kind of get what you're talking about now.
Yeah, it's my business partner is single, so he gets to work on that issue. It makes things go better.
It's a rough life.
Exactly.
All right, James. We got to get off the field, so let's go 3 and out real quick, which is a list of 3 quick-fire questions to bring us on home in victory formation. Are you ready, sir?
I am ready.
All right, first off, who is the most influential in your career?
You know what? It was probably, I used to work for the Broncos. It was a guy by the name of Greg Carney. He was my boss when I was in the marketing department working on the publications, and he was someone who taught me a lot about how to run a business and be a leader of a staff. And he gave me the opportunity and the free rein to run their publications and do things that I thought were right. So he probably gave me the biggest opportunity and taught me the most things.
What's one piece of advice that you give to someone who would want to follow in your footsteps?
Don't take no for an answer. I mean, we had so many people when we were coming up with the idea telling us it's not going to work, and here's the reasons it's not going to work. And you got to listen to that, and you got to try and be able to shoot those ideas down. But everybody's going to tell you why you can't do something. If you really believe in it, you just got to forge ahead and not listen to the naysayers.
It's pretty solid advice. It's very simple, but it's very powerful.
Yep.
What's a book recommendation? We love reading here on Football Convos. Football, life, or otherwise, what should we be reading?
You know what? I'm almost through Parcells at the moment, which is a fantastic read. And, you know, he's a fascinating guy just in terms of his leadership qualities and, you know, his ability to take whatever team he inherited and turn, you know, losing franchises into winners. So that's a really, really good one. And then there's a book, and gosh, I wish I could remember the title of it. I'm blanking, but it's Ernie Accorsi wrote a book about putting together the Giants, and that was, you know, kind of back in between their 2 Super Bowl years. It was really good. But I would recommend Parcells. I think it's a fascinating read. Whether you're a football fan or not, even just from a business standpoint, I think people can learn a lot from it.
I think one of the most fascinating Parcells stories for me is that right before he decided to get into coaching, he almost considered opening a Pizza Hut, which is kind of funny how different history would have been if he decided to, you know, open up a Pizza Hut franchise.
Well, and a lot of that took place here in Colorado because he was coaching down at Air Force, and then he got out of it and didn't know if he wanted to move his family, you know, across the country to New York, and he wound up being a Broncos season ticket holder for a year, and, you know, he was miserable and, you know, doing a 9-to-5 job like the rest of us, and decided, you know what, it may not be great to move my family across country, but it's going to be even worse if I'm just miserable every single day. So that's part of what made him decide to get back into coaching. But yeah, some of those things and the Pizza Hut questions were out here in Colorado.
Mm-hmm. Now, without Parcells, there might not be Belichick on that certain level, or at least not as early.
Yeah, and, you know, it's one of those things, and I understand that Belichick is reviled. You know, hey, here in Denver, we certainly have had our fair share of disappointments at the Patriots' hands, but I like when everything's not homogenous and everything's not vanilla, and, you know, you gotta have a villain, and Belichick's a great one at it, and the guy's a football genius. He really
Absolutely.
is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love it. You know, it's somebody that you got to shoot for. To, hey, here's who we're trying to knock off his perch, and if you don't have those people, it gets pretty boring in sports. So I'm a Belichick fan, not from the standpoint of I root for his teams or I want him to win, but I just like what he brings to the game. I think it's healthy for the game.
Absolutely. And like you said, he is an absolute genius, almost a savant, and everyone's throwing shade him and the Patriots' way because of the whole Deflategate thing. But the thing is, you know, every single one of those fans, if Belichick was for some reason a free agent, would break their necks trying to get him to come to their team. So,
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. We, you know, here in Denver, we certainly wish our coaches would have been trying to find every angle for how to win their playoff game versus trying to find every angle for how to get out of town and find a new job. So, you know, and just the stuff like the formations and making a running back as the ineligible, you know, receiver on a play, and it's just stuff you would have seen. He's pulling things out of the 30s and 40s and 50s that, you know, you haven't seen in football in decades, and it just shows that he's such a student of the game, and it's just fascinating to watch. It sets up for, you know, it is kind of a Super Bowl pitting, you know, hated team against hated team, but in terms of just well-coached teams and quality football players, it's going to be fascinating to watch.
All right. What's next from you and yours, Mile High Sports Cover 32? What should the good people be excited for?
Well, you know, we're just going to continue to roll on, and actually the off-season at Cover 32 is busier than the regular season. You know, we'll start the Monday after the Super Bowl, start breaking down free agents. We'll start breaking down the draft. You know, for us, the 2015 season doesn't start on March 10th when the NFL calendar rolls over. It starts on February 2nd. So obviously we'll be doing a lot of Super Bowl stuff in the next, you know, 10 days or so. But February 2 is the start of 2015 for us, and it puts 32 teams back into the mix. So it's going to be fun. The off season has turned into something that's almost as fascinating as the regular season, which is cool. Makes it something that's a 12-month a year job for us, and that's certainly a good thing.
Absolutely. And Cover 32, Mile High Sports, all of this information will be available on our show page as well. James Merilatt, good talking to you. Thanks a lot for coming on Football Convos. It was a pleasure, man.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's a cool thing you guys are doing, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Thanks for listening to Football Convos. For more daily football conversations, visit footballconvos.com or visit us at iTunes.